My name is Daniel Matei.
I'm Mason Lynass.
I'm Eugene Kwong.
And we're going to show you some techniques for performing mollyherron's spring planting.
I'm gonna talk about the setup of this piece. We try to find some resonator for where we play the rulers on, but this is the final decision we make because of it is the easiest way for us to move and it bring the best sound of it. And for the rulers, we did some tricks for the rulers because there's a little cord board behind the ruler. It makes us a bit difficult to move it, sliding it on the table. So we just try to tape some score tape on the table. It makes us easier to move it around. And some of us try to tape some golfer here. It makes it easier with some friction to move it on. But for myself, I find it, I just worry about flicking it over on the floor. I make myself a little tunnel for my ruler, so if I just release my hands, it will just stay here.
So on my ruler I have a little piece of tape just because I like using it for like grip purposes. I have my 4 fingers kind of starting on the tape, and I use my thumb on the end of my board, kind of like how you have your thumb on the back of a guitar, just for like support purposes, I guess. And so when you slide the ruler to the different lengths, you can use your fingers supported by your thumb to slide the ruler on the table. It's important when you play different lengths to make sure that your fingers are on the right place on the ruler so that you have a good sound, because if you hold your fingers too close to the edge of the table, it's really quiet and it doesn't really sound like anything. So like when I play an 11, for example, I usually have my fingers around 9 to get this sound, as opposed to that quieter sound. And whenever you move the ruler to a different length, you have to make sure that your fingers are in an appropriate place to get the best quality of sound. So we have 2 main ways that we play these rulers. Sometimes we go down, and sometimes we go up. You can use like your whole hand, or you can use a finger to play down. Doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, but you want to avoid like the contact finger sound of sliding off the ruler if you can. And then when I play up, I can do it from the front, or I can do it from the side. The main distinction between these 2 is if you play down, the way that the ruler bends, the ruler will like go up first and then hit the table, whereas if you play up, the ruler hits the table a little bit faster. So there's just barely a difference between the sound that you get between them. Let's see if I can show you. Here's up, and here's down. Just a little bit different. It also helps me sometimes to play up if I'm trying to get to my other instruments. Just makes the transitions easier. And if I'm playing really articulate things, like the split pocket part, it's easier for me to go down. So different motions for different circumstances.
So in the score, in addition to the inch numbers or indications, there are 2 other indications for the rulers, the L's and the H's. And the L means loose, which, for example, when I have a 9L, I would place my hands as far as I can from the edge of the table, and kind of going for a sound like this. So the other indication, other than the loose, is the H, which means a hard stop, and you're trying to stop the sound wherever the H is indicated, and you're trying to get a consistent sound throughout the ensemble, and the best way to do that is to have a little force when you stop it. So like an 11H would look like something like this. The dynamic range of the ruler is very limited, and there's a certain point at where you cannot go any louder, and because of that, most of the time it's easier to create a bigger dynamic range by playing the softer stuff softer. And one of the ways, there are two ways really that you can affect the dynamics, and one of them is, of course, like how hard you like plug the ruler. For example, this opposed to this. The other one is how closely you place your finger to the edge of the board. And as Mesa mentioned it before, if your finger is very close to the edge of the table, you're gonna get a very quiet sound, and the further you go, the louder it's gonna get.
So all of our pitched instruments are played using our fingers, and the way that we play the gongs is with the pads of our fingers. So sometimes I use like this softer part of my finger, or I'll use like kind of my first knuckle sometimes. They sound a little bit different. Or, well, there's like a little bit of a difference in attack. When I roll on the gong, I think we decided to use 2 fingers in a hand. And then when I play the crotale, I flick it to play one note. That was a loud one. They're not all that loud, but they have to be pretty loud. So I can't really go like this because it doesn't get enough volume for me. So I flick it. And when I roll on it, I'm also using 2 or 3 fingers. Like that.
Yeah, for me, I have a different setup with Mason. Mine is the flower pot with a crotale. I also use my finger pad to strike on the flower pot. But for the crotale, I used to use nail like Mason, but I find it quite hard for me to keep it for the whole week after the rehearsals. So I make myself a tray, like this is a little penny. I try to bend it with my finger and some moleskin on it, so I can get a very clear articulation, but not a very hard sound like a metal sound. And I can get a quite consistent sound with it because I didn't get it with my nails. Sometimes I just felt. Yeah. But for the rolling part, I try to use, because I just have 2 penny on my index, then I try to roll both of the instruments with my nails, like this. And also on the crotale.
So Molly composed some cool slide sounds that have sort of their own technique. I'm going to play an 11 to a 13 real quick. There are a few things to consider about slides. It's important to make sure that you are sliding at the appropriate speed, and if you have like a half note slide, you want the slide to take up the whole duration of the note value. So if I play a half note, I don't want to move too quickly because it should take up the whole note value. You have to move your fingers a little bit if you have really big slides, just to make sure that you're getting the ruler sound the whole way. See if I can show you one of those. Those are pretty tricky. You gotta practice your finger movements. So whenever there's an accent written on the score, that's Molly's indication of a rearticulation of a sustain. So, for example, I'll play my part at G. It sounds like this. And the whole point of that is to just rearticulate the sustain and try not to cut off the sound as much as possible, so that it ideally sounds like one continuous